Lehman of New York told listeners in a 1952 radio address that he wanted to discuss an important subject with them, he prepared them gently. Some members of this radio audience may be surprised to hear that immigration is an issue, but it is. The country did not regard immigration as worthy of discussion because, quite simply, there were not many immigrants. A 1924 law passed by Congress had instituted a system of ethnic quotas so stringent that large-scale immigration was choked off for decades. The quotas aimed to limit not only the volume of people entering the country, but the type. In order to keep America white, Anglo-Saxon, and Protestant, the laws sharply curtailed immigration from Southern and Eastern Europe and outright banned people from nearly all of Asia. More immigrants entered the country in the first decade of the 20th century than between 1931 and 1971. By the time Ellis Island closed, the share of foreign-born immigrants had dropped into the single digits and kept falling for years as older immigrants passed away. This was exactly as the writers of the 1924 law had intended. As David A. Reed, one of the bill's sponsors, crowed just before its passage, the new immigration legislation marks a complete reversal of our previous policy, a landmark in our national history. We no longer are to be a haven, a refuge for oppressed the whole world over. We found we could not be, and now we definitely abandon that theory. America will cease to be the melting pot. That would have been the end of the story, except that for the next 40 years a small number of lawmakers, activists, and presidents worked relentlessly to abolish the 1924 law and its quotas. Their efforts established the new mythology of the United States as a nation of immigrants that is so familiar to all of us now. Through a world war, a global refugee crisis, and a McCarthyist fever that swept the country, these Americans never stopped trying to restore the United States as a country that lived up to its vision as a home for the huddled masses, from Emma Lazarus's famous poem. Their effort culminated in 1965, when President Lyndon Johnson signed into law a bill that abolished the quotas and banned discrimination against immigrants based on race or ethnicity. It also decreed that preference be given to immigrants who were reuniting with family members, as well as those with special skills in the arts and sciences. Not many Americans today know about the 1965 Immigration and Nationality Act, but it was one of the most transformative laws in our nation's history. By ending a system of racial preferences among immigrants, the law reversed a decades-long decline in immigration levels and opened the door to Asian, Latin American, African, and Middle Eastern immigration at a scale never seen before, changes that are so evident now that they seem to have been inevitable. But while the architects of the 1965 law imagined themselves to be restoring a lapsed ideal, they were, in fact, doing something unprecedented. For most of this country's past, it had been firmly established that being an American was inextricably tied to European ancestry. The Immigration and Nationality Act obliterated that notion by daring to outline a vision of belonging that transcended race and ethnic origin, in effect saying to the rest of the world, especially the wide world outside Europe, that all peoples were eligible for the American project. To the extent that the law's significance has been discussed at all in recent years, it is typically treated as a footnote to the landmark civil rights legislation of the same era, and assumed to have been swept into existence by the undertow of the fight for black equality. While the civil rights movement did popularize a moral framework and contribute political momentum for the law, the Immigration and Nationality Act was the culmination of a distinct, decades-long struggle.